And I'm really grateful to Mark and the whole tribe at Oops for hosting me, so that I can share this journey that I did summer of 2020, paddling from the very southern reaches of the Puget Sound all the way up as close as I could possibly get to the Canadian border. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I guess I could just start sharing my screen, maybe, huh? Rating. So kayaking the Salish Sea. This was a journey of just shy of 130 miles. I took a couple of weeks to do it. I've got 14 mostly leisurely days in parentheses there, because a goal I set for myself on this trip was to really just slow down and stop to smell the barnacles along the way, sort of thing. Because when I do my longer solo expeditions, I'm usually really driven and very goal oriented. And it's oftentimes about me clicking off as many miles as I possibly can. So I just made a vow with myself that I wasn't going to do that on this trip. I really just wanted to get to know my own local waters, my home waters better, immerse myself in that coastal experience and just enjoy myself. I stayed at a total of 9 Cascadia Marine Trail campsites, which I will talk about more in just a little bit. But before I dive into the depths of the presentation, I wanted to give a much deserved shout out to a couple of entities. So first and foremost, the indigenous peoples, the tribal First Nations, whose ancestral and current homelands encompass this broad area that you see here depicting the Salish Sea. So the Salish Sea, as most of you probably know, is really just the umbrella term for 3 big bodies of water. I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but we've got the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which runs pretty much east-west, and then the Puget Sound and the San Juan Islands, and then up into the Strait of Georgia, going up into British Columbia. So I'm really grateful for the indigenous peoples' past and current stewardship of these lands and waters that I've had the privilege of paddling through for a fair number of years. And my second shout out goes to Washington Water Trails. And I'm assuming or hoping that many of you are familiar with this very pivotal nonprofit agency, because it's because of Washington Water Trails advocacy and hard work over the last 30 some years that we now have access to 160 day use sites and water access sites, as well as about 60 campsites. That number varies a little bit, but about 60 campsites scattered throughout the San Juan Islands. And Water Trails has come under some pressure recently from different land managers, wanting them to show that these sites are actually being visited, to document that and track visitation. And there's some threat that if they can't provide this documentation, that some of these sites could be closed down, which would be really tragic. So Water Trails has come up with this really nifty site. I just took a screenshot of it here. That's on their main website, wwta.org, where you can easily go in and track your site usage. I mean, it'll take you no more than 45 seconds to enter your site data. It's super easy, and you can go back in time. You can go back last summer, the summer before, 3-4 years. They just want people to go in and just show that they're using either the day use sites, the access and or the campsites. So I highly encourage you folks, if you're using them in any capacity out in the San Juans or the South Sound, to go ahead and do that really quick. But so onto the journey. So much of this trip was really about me learning to go with the flow. That's what paddlers are supposed to do, right? And it's something that I often struggle with. It was really also about me just letting go of a much bigger plan, because that summer of 2020, I had planned to do a second through paddle of the Inside Passage. I'd been planning it for about a year. And so I the goal was to start from Lummi Island. I live part-time on Lummi Island, which is near Bellingham, really close to the Canadian border. And I was going to take 2.5 to 3 months to paddle to Sitka, Alaska. But we all know what happened in the spring of 2020, and all of our grand adventures were put on the back burner, right? So once I got done kind of moping about that situation, I began to realize that if I was going to do anything, have any fun that summer, that I really needed to align my goals, my adventures with the prevailing circumstances. And I needed to just start focusing on what I could do versus what I couldn't do. So, you know, it could always be worse, right? It just turns out that I have this amazing body of water right out my doorstep. That's a real prominent landmark, nav aid on the right side of the screen there. That's Village Point, which is on the northwest side of Lummi Island. And we're looking straight across the Strait of Georgia here toward Susha and Mesha and Peytos Islands. And then Canada is just like right around the corner. So this is like 5 minutes from my private beach on Lummi Island. So it's like, you know, get over it, just start exploring your own waters. And I started planning the ultimate staycation. That kind of was the catchphrase in 2020, and to an extent it still is here, or today. So I started studying a master chart of the Puget Sound. And the more that I looked at all the little nooks and crannies, the more that I had this deep desire to really want to get to know my own backyard. And, you know, I paddled fairly extensively from Anacortes north and in the San Juan Islands, but hadn't done much of anything at all in the South Sound. So I started plotting just a rough course from south to north. And that's what that squiggly red line shows. And in the process of doing that, I was reminded how much I really do thrive on this point-to-point perspective of a long linear paddle. And also this light bulb went off where I thought, hey, I can actually finally maybe connect the last of my inside passage dots. And what I mean by that is in 2010, I had done a through paddle of the inside passage from Anacortes to Juneau, Alaska. But as you can see, there's a couple swaths of water that remained unpaddled there. A little chunk at the bottom and a little chunk at the top. So starting at the top, so that orange arrow that just came in there, that's Juneau, where I finished my 2010 expedition. And there's Skagway up at the top, where you literally run out of ocean. Skagway is considered the quote unquote finish line of the inside passage. So I wanted to paddle that section and connect those dots up north. So in August of 2016, my partner Ben and I, we flew to Juneau and rented, we flew with all of our kayak gear, of course, and we rented a couple of very heavy plastic sea kayaks, and we embarked on this journey. So here, Ben is just rounding the point. We're leaving Auk Bay, where the Alaska Ferry Terminal is, and we're beginning our approach into Lynn Canal, which is a really long, wind-prone fjord. So this is our first campsite, about 15 miles north of Juneau. I've just got a few photos from this leg, and I promise we'll get back to the Puget Sound. But Lynn Canal is just drop dead gorgeous, real steep and mountainous, as you can see. It seems like everything is just supersized up in Alaska. But we completed that 100 miles and, you know, checked the boxes. And so I felt like I had connected those dots there. And what remained was this patch of water down south, down in the underbelly of the inside passage, if you will. So the Puget Sound, I learned in my research, is the second largest estuary in the United States. It's right behind Chesapeake Bay over on the East Coast. So what do we do when we have a multi-day paddling trip in mind. We all start planning, right? We get out the charts and the guidebooks and the tide and current tables and fire up the computer and dig out the reading glasses. So that's pretty much what I did. And I love this part. It's all part of the adventure, I think. And I love the plotting and planning phase. And I go into my mad scientist mode. So the next few slides I want to share are some of the resources that I used to plan this trip. And don't feel like you need to write any of this down, because I gave Mark a resource document, which I believe that he shared, he emailed with all of you guys. But if you didn't get that, let us know and we can easily get that to you. It's a Google Doc. And so there's a lot of clickable links in there, and everything that I'm going to share in the next few slides is itemized in that document. But for the whole route, I ended up needing 4 charts, and those are itemized in the document. And I ended up needing 3 guidebooks. So first and foremost was the Cascadia Marine Trail guidebook, indispensable resource. In fact, when I do even a day trip or a mini trip out in the San Juans or the Sound, I'll throw this in a dry bag, because it's just got, just everything you possibly could need to know about the campsites, the facilities, the landing and launchings. The other book that I used was Kayaking the Inside Passage by Robert Miller. That book was my Bible on my through paddle. And surprisingly, there was some tidbits, some tips and tricks that I learned from it for the South Sound area. And then Kayaking the San Juan Islands by Randall Washburn and Randy Gersten. There was some really good information in that book as well. And then in addition to the guidebooks, I consulted a few other books out there. Water Trail, The Hidden Path Through Puget Sound by Joel Rogers. This is just a gem of a book. It's just filled with just gorgeous photos and beautiful reflective prose. And Joel's book is kind of a combination of how-to and the glory of it all. And then the Sailor Sea, the Jewel of the Pacific Northwest, that book is brought to life by a number of different people. It's just beautifully done. And then lastly, We Are Puget Sound, Discovering and Recovering the Sailor Sea. Just tons of backstory and history in that book as well. So these 3 books, not only are they just, beautiful coffee table style books, but they also explicitly spell out how endangered and how fragile this area is. And they all seem to have a real positive overtone to them in terms of, what we can do to be less a part of the problem. I'll talk about a few apps that I used. Deep Zoom, I'm assuming a lot of you are familiar with deepzoom.com. It's basically, it displays like an animated current flow that's superimposed over a nautical chart. And if you never used it before, just go to deepzoom.com. It'll just take a few minutes for you to wrap your brain around. But it's essentially the digital version of the pictorial atlases that some of us may still use. And it only works in the US. It doesn't work up in Canada as of yet, but it's a really, really cool app. And then another one is Navionics. So this app's like a $22 app on your phone, but here's a little pro tip for you. You can go to their website, navionics.com, and they have a chart viewer app. So that's free, obviously, and you can just go in and just click and drag and plot your course, and it'll give you your distance and your bearing, and you can just draw your whole course. It's satellite based too, so if you're using the app on your phone or whatever device, you don't need a cell signal for it to work. Don't get me wrong, I am really, truly an old-fashioned paper chart and compass kind of gal. But I have found, like, in the last couple of years that I've been consulting these digital resources more and more, if only as a electronic second opinion. But it's just nice to have a backup, especially when you're in some, crux areas or pinch points, tidal current areas. It's nice to have something to get a second opinion. So Vessel Finder app, there's a lot of different apps out there that pretty much do the same thing. This is just a screenshot that I took when I first opened the app up the other day, but it shows all the live vessel traffic in a pretty good chunk of the world. And then of course you can zoom in a particular area that, say, you might be paddling and you want to see what boats are about to mow you down. I've got an example a little later on in the talk of where the Vessel Finder app came in really, really handy on a crossing that I had to do that day. I used a Garmin InReach, so I had the tracking on, and this shows my route from south to north. And as you can see, there's a little gap right there where the dots are not connected. So when I get to that part chronologically in the story, I'll explain what went wrong there. But let's get on the water. So I started way down in what's referred to as the Nisqually Reach. It's adjacent to the really popular Billy Frank Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. Beautiful area just in its own right to go for, even a day paddle. Now, who's this character? I think I led you guys to believe that I did this trip solo. And for the most part I did, but it occurred to me that I needed to figure out a way to get my car from the nature center way down there all the way back to my home on Lummi Island. So I convinced my boyfriend that he should come down with me and join me for the first day, do a really short paddle to the first island, like 2.5 miles. And then he could go back the next morning and take the car back to the house. So he went for it. And here we are approaching Anderson Island. Anderson Island is the southernmost island in the Inside Passage. And for a lot of through paddlers, this is going to be their very first stop. But the approach here, it's really obvious that this is a marine trail site. And you do have to have reservations. Out of the 60-some sites in the system, there's just a handful that you do need reservations for, and Anderson Island is one of them. But you're going to encounter this kind of signage at most of the sites, which is really kind of nice. You'll have some sort of a "You Are Here" map, and oftentimes there's a "Leave No Trace" ethics brochure. And then on the right side, what you really want to look for is that what we call a carcinite sign with all the emblems on it. That's what's going to tell you that you truly are at a CMT site. So the campsite at Anderson Island is on a small, narrow spit that protects this tidal lagoon. And there is a floating bridge in the back if you wanted to explore beyond the campsite a little bit. And Ben and I did. We hiked across the bridge and walked around the island. It was really lovely. And Anderson Island, or the CMT site, I should say, is a little bit different than the rest of the system in that it's not part of the state lands. Access is granted by the local island community. So definitely did not want to wear out our welcome here. We want to practice leave no trace as we would at any campsite. So one thing that I really enjoy about these marine trail campsites, both in Washington and up in British Columbia, they have the BC Marine Trails, is that they are very, what I refer to as very civil. So you're almost always guaranteed a flat spot to pitch your tent. And there's always a picnic table and oftentimes a fire ring. And easy in out with the beaches, and there's not these horrific carries, and there's always some sort of a vault toilet. So as many of you know, this is not the case when you get further north up the Inside Passage. It's all wilderness camping, and you're lucky if you can find a halfway flat spot to pitch your tent. One thing that's not guaranteed is a beautiful sunset, but we did enjoy that on our first night out. So the next day, we've kind of go our separate ways. Ben's going to do his big 3-mile solo back to the car. And I'm going to continue on for a couple of weeks, working my way north toward Lummi Island. And I was really pleasantly surprised by my experience that first day on the South Sound. Very little in terms of boat traffic, really protected, calm and protected, hardly any shore development, and then a lot of beaches like you see in the foreground here, super easy to come ashore and take a break. And it's not very often that you get to paddle by a prison, so I took a quick photo of this. This is the McNeil Island Correction Center, which was formerly the McNeil Island Federal Penitentiary. And just some of the mansions up on the high bluffs, looking out over the sound. So here I'm getting my first glimpse of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So I'd never paddled in this area, and so I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that it was notorious for a lot of current flushing underneath that bridge and could be really busy with boat traffic. The red arrow that you see there is pointing to the Tacoma Narrows State Park, and there is a CMT site there. And I had a reservation for it, but as I got closer, it's a weekend, it's a sunny COVID weekend, and the place was just a mob scene. I mean, it was just, packed with people and dogs and kids and boom boxes, and it's like, I have a really nice pull with the ebb current here. I'm just cruising along at like 4.5 knots with minimal effort. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep going. It wasn't that much further to the next campsite. So I just cruised underneath the bridge. And I originally had planned to cross over to Point Defiance and explore Commencement Bay, which is where Tacoma is. But oh my God, the boat traffic here was absolutely insane. To my left is Gig Harbor, which is a real popular marina. And the traffic going back and forth to Gig Harbor and I guess over into Tacoma, I mean, for the thousands and thousands of miles I've got underneath my hull, I have never, ever felt this vulnerable as I did that day. I just felt like a, it's the moving target. I was kind of freaked out. So I bailed on that and I just kind of went left and hugged the shoreline and worked my way to the next campsite, which was just a few miles north of Gig Harbor, Sunrise Beach State Park. And the sign is a little blown out here. So that red oval, that's the sign that's telling me I am indeed at the CMT site. And it's just up the hill. So this is looking back toward Commencement Bay, where I had planned to go to Mount Rainier. And that little beach there is totally underwater at high tide. But the campsite was just up the hill, just a short walk. And the resident deer seemed to be very accustomed to campers there. So I really enjoyed just kind of hanging out with those guys. And again, just a very civil campsite, nice flat grassy area, picnic table, really private and quiet, a split rail fence to hang all of my gear on. And then just a short walk up the hill is the parking lot for the day users, which can be quite busy. And there's a vault toilet up there. You can even get rid of your garbage. There's just no water here, just as an FYI. But there's a caretaker on the premises, and he locks the gates, kicks everybody out at dusk, which is kind of nice. Even though the place is really popular, it just gets really quiet once that sun goes down.
Susan?
Yeah.
We have a question here. Somebody was asking, how do you maintain 4.5 knots? It just sounds really fast.
Well, with that ebb current, with that lot of current flushing through underneath the Tacoma Bridge, and just paddling at my regular 3.5 knots with that assist and no wind, no headwind, it was actually pretty easy. I've been in some tidal streams up in BC where pretty effortlessly. I'm going 6, 7, 8 knots, you know, for an hour or two, which is, you know, it's like you found the fast lane, right? But then as soon as that current stops and pauses, then you're like back down to your regular muddling along at 3 knots, and you're like, hey, this is a lot of work. But yeah, no, that was not a problem that day. Yeah, good question. So this is my sunrise that morning at Sunrise Beach State Park, looking over at Mount Rainier and taking off on a new day, heading to Blake Island. I had about 13 nautical miles. So I'm doing, for me, this is a much more shorter, reasonable distance, and just working my way up Colvos Passage. So here I'm just starting to get my first glimpse of the Seattle skyline. I'm going to be getting into more urban paddling here. Here's a much bigger glimpse of the Seattle skyline. And, you know, I came across a fair number of no trespassing signs on the south part of the sound. And this one had a bit of an attitude to it. And yeah, it's interesting because Washington State has perhaps one of the most unusual rules in regards to beach access, in that private beach tideland ownership is granted all the way down to the low water mark, where it's typically the, you know, the high tidelands with most Western states. And that's because in the late 1800s, the state started selling off tidelands to private citizens. And this practice continued until 1971, when it was finally banned. But unfortunately, in the interim, 73% of Washington's tidelands are now privately owned. And that's why Washington Water Trails is so important, because that's what they do. You know, they lobby for our access to these waters, and they're always trying to implement new areas where we can access it. Oh, and I threw that in there because someone had a sense of humor and had painted in nude beach. So apparently we have a private nude beach going on here. So I'm going underneath the Southworth Fauntleroy ferry bridge or terminal, whatever you call it. And this is the ferry that connects Seattle with the peninsula. And I threw this map in. I just stole this off of the web, just to illustrate how busy this area is with ferry traffic. So it wouldn't hurt to have the ferry schedule with you, or at least be really aware of where these ferries are coming and going, where their routes are, because they're fast and they can seemingly come out of nowhere. Got Blake Island in my crosshairs. I was looking forward to Blake Island. I read a lot of good things about it. As I'm approaching, though, apparently a lot of other people had read good things about it, because I could see it was going to be quite busy. There were already a fair number of boats moored and or anchored out there. And when I landed, I learned that the 3 CMT sites on the north end of the island were occupied by a huge group of kids from Vashon Island Parks and Rec. So they had pretty much overtaken the whole thing and overflowed into the regular public camping around the corner, which was kind of a bummer for me, but you know, they had every right to be there. They came under their own power. But fortunately, I was able to score on this campsite on the far end of the public camping area. So I was pretty happy about that, and got as far away from those kids as I could, and set up my tent. And before I headed out to explore the island a little bit, I made sure I put all my food away, because you see this little bugger, yeah, and telling it to go again. Anyway, you saw the raccoon. They were incorrigible. So you really want to make sure that fortunately the park supplied these stainless steel containers that you could put your food in. So I went off on a little hike. Blake Island is about 1 mile square, and I'm camped on the left side, the west side, and I had heard that there were showers over on the other side. So I walked 1 mile each way for those showers, and it was worth every step. Trying to get this to cooperate. Few things that I saw along the way. The grounds are really well kept. A beautiful marina there with sweeping views of Seattle. And there's camping on that side as well. I'm sure this would have been beautiful at night with the skyline all lit up. And there were quite a few campers there, but I think they mostly came from the motorboats in the marina. But for me, it's just a little bit too open. Not quite as private as my site back on the other side of the island. So I walked back there and had myself a nice dinner and enjoyed yet another beautiful sunset. So I had a whole whopping 4 nautical miles the next day planned, keeping with my vow to, do shorter trips and just really soak it all in. And that white nave, looks like a little mini lighthouse there, that is Orchard Point. And so to orient you guys just a little bit here, this is just a screenshot from my InReach, my Garmin InReach, but there's where I started, down at Blake Island, and the X is Orchard Point. And I was heading to, I had a couple choices, Manchester State Park. And if that was occupied or just didn't resonate with me, I could just cross the street and go over to Fort Ward State Park. And then I also had a trip into Bremerton planned, which is a real busy naval port, working my way through Rich Passage. So when I got to Manchester, it totally resonated with me. There were no other campers there. And the campsite was just through the hedges here on the other side of that little clearing and up on the hill. So again, as you probably figured out, for me, it's all about the privacy and the solitude. And this was another really nice campsite. And I certainly made good use of the trail signage up there, hanging my wet gear. Now, this was interesting. This was a torpedo warehouse that was built in 1901. So now it's just the picnic pavilion for the state park, but this is just part of the massive military installation that was implemented at the turn of the century to protect Bremerton, the naval base just around the corner there.
Susan?
Yeah.
Where did you keep your kayak every night?
Right there. I pulled it up a little bit past, up above the high tide line, of course, just past the signage usually. I felt safe enough, even though there were a lot of people milling about, they were all kicked out at dusk. So I didn't feel like anybody was going to mess with my kayak. I just had, all my essentials up in the camp with me. So it wasn't a problem at all. Yeah. This is the next morning, getting ready to head out, and the tide was coming in pretty quickly. So I dilly-dallied for a bit so I didn't have to drag my kayak through all of that muck there. And I crossed Rich Passage, which is it's a real short crossing, but super busy with the ferries. I think there's like 9 runs a day going back and forth there, and then just all the traffic going in and out of Bremerton. But that red arrow is where I was camped over at Manchester, and I just did a quick hop, skip, and a jump, and I wanted to check out this CMT site. And this is maintained by the Kitsap Peninsula Water Trails, which is essentially a branch of Washington Water Trails. It was really nice, but really open, as you can see. And there were no showers there either. So I think I made a good choice by camping on the other side. Totally in my happy place here. I had pretty good weather this whole trip up until the very end. And this was one of the calmest days. And today I'm just working my way along the eastern shoreline of Bainbridge Island and heading to the very top of it where there is a CMT site. Now this was really weird. This was a rather sizable seaweed mat, for lack of a better word, about the size of maybe a football field and a half, that was kind of guarding the entrance to Blakely Harbor. But I was able to skirt around that. And I did, of course, make it to what's called Fay Bainbridge site on the north end of the island. And beautiful campsite, it appears from here. The beach is like right there, got a great view. But on three sides all around me is a car camping area. So I knew about this, so I kind of already had the mindset for it, so it was okay. But, you know, again, it's peak season. It's a really popular area, beautiful park, but, you know, you're dealing with a playground and kids and people's generators and you know, just people walking through your campsite constantly. But, you know, there's always a silver lining, because a couple of my friends happen to live on Bainbridge Island, and they were following me on my tracking device, and they called me and they're like, "You're on our home turf, we're bringing dinner." So they showed up with a bottle of wine and a couple of cold beers and some pizza, and we just had a couple of wonderful hours just kind of catching up. So my friends Kate and Kai, my water trail angels, you know, everybody, you know, you have to have a water trail angel on your journeys. They really are what makes it so memorable. Had to get a pretty early start the next morning. I was on the water by 6:30. I only had 12 miles to go to my next camp, which was Meadowdale. You'll hear about Meadowdale in a little bit. It was kind of a hoot. But out of that 12 miles, I had a 4 nautical mile crossing across Puget Sound, which, as you can see, it's kind of like crossing a big nautical roundabout, really, really busy shipping lane. So I was a bit concerned about that. And this is where the Vessel Finder app came in really handy. So the two black X's there represent the crossing from where to where, and then the red X in the middle is, I'm pretty much in the middle of the shipping lane there. So I fire up my Vessel Finder app, and I'm kind of looking at the boats that are in the vicinity. And so I'm not worried about this guy, right? He's heading south. This guy's heading the opposite direction. And this guy is going into the harbor there. But I'm like looking up here at this yellow icon, the Matson Kodiak. And in the actual scenario, that boat was a little further north, almost off the chart. So had I started the crossing, I wouldn't have even been aware of that boat until I was already committed and probably in the shipping lane. So what's cool about the app is you can click on any of these icons, and on the left side here, it'll bring up all kinds of information. Usually there's a photo of the ship, but really all I care about is what direction is it going and how fast is it moving. So this guy is moving, just call it 19 knots. And so I'm doing the math. He is 9 nautical miles away, and I'm muddling along at 3.5 knots, 4 knots maybe, because, you know, I'm not dilly-dallying here. I wouldn't say I'm sprinting across, but I'm paddling with purpose. So, you know, doing the math there, he is going to be intersecting my trajectory right about the time I'm going to be in the middle of the shipping lane. So that was kind of a no-brainer, go or no scenario. I obviously waited, which was a really good call. Now, what if you don't have this option? What if you don't have a cell signal or a phone or an app? So, you know, sometimes just looking both ways and paddling like hell doesn't always cut it. You can listen to Vessel Traffic Services on your VHF radio. Channel 14 is what you would tune into in the Seattle area. And then you can also call in your position and your intent to cross. And I believe that is channel 13. I've got a question mark there because I'm not positive. I've never done that in this particular area. But I got across safely, and on my way to Meadowdale, I passed by the lovely seaside community of Edmonds. And I made a stop here. I was going to take about an hour, hour and a half, and go find some lunch. And so I pulled in beside the ferry terminal here and pulled my kayak up on the beach. And again, nobody's like even paying any attention to me. So I felt totally safe just pulling my kayak up high and leaving it for the duration. And when I was gone, nobody bothered it whatsoever. And gonna head in looking for some lunch. But before I did that, I thought, well, I'm gonna mosey into the ferry terminal and use the facilities there, use the bathroom to freshen up a little bit. And it's a good thing that I did, because you know, it's a hot day. And so I look in the mirror there, and I've got salt and sand just kind of caked on my face. And whatever I had for a snack before I arrived was still stuck in my teeth. And then I'm looking down at I changed into some Crocs out of my paddling booties. And I literally have streamers of seaweed stuck to both of my sandals. I'm walking through the ferry terminal. So I'm like, good grief, clean yourself up, Susan. And I did. And I went for a stroll, and I found the fish and chips place. So I had myself a little party there. And you know, there's pros and cons, of course, to urban paddling. You know, some of the cons are, of course, all the people and the shipping traffic. But the pros are that you are never more than a day away from a hot latte, a cold lemonade, or a basket of fish and chips. And I found that to be true. So after my lunch, I headed out for Meadowdale and came across this fellow. He was a very happy, chatty dude. And he was quite proud of this, I guess it's a Dungeness crab that he had just caught in his canoe. Here, I'm just starting to get a glimpse of Mount Baker. And my mouse is freezing up again. There we go. Mount Baker. So I'm back into more familiar waters. So this is my campsite at Meadowdale. And I wish I had a video of this too, so you could really get the essence of how loud it was. So you see my tent in the lower corner there, and you see my tent's close proximity to the railroad there. And I think that's an Amtrak train going by. So the novelty wore off after about the 5th train. It was just insanely loud, like ear-piercing loud. And the trains were really random, sometimes one every 2 or 3 hours, and sometimes 1 or 2 in an hour. And they ran 24/7. So it was just crazy. But again, silver lining, there was a creek right behind my tent, and I had picked up a couple cans of wine at the fish and chips place, which I think is the best invention since break apart paddles, canned wine. So I chilled my my wine in that creek behind the tent, which was just lovely. And then I met Ranger Doug. So Ranger Doug has been the ranger here at Meadowdale since time immemorial, I think. And he was just a real welcoming, generous person. And once I got settled into my campsite there, he came down to say hi. I'm watching him approach, and he is carrying this huge 3-ring binder, one of those like 3-inch vinyl binders that appeared to be all dilapidated, and there was documents and things sticking out and falling out of it. But he comes down and he sets it square in the middle of my picnic table, and he says, before you leave, be sure to sign our guest register, and then also have a look at some of the postcards and mailings in there. So it was sort of a scrapbook as well. So when Doug left, while I was eating dinner, I leafed through the scrapbook, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was so heartwarming, because what it was stuffed with was correspondence from people kayakers who had come through and stayed there. And many of them were in the very beginning stages of their Inside Passage trips. So like this one, for example, you know, we made it. They finished their trip, and we hope your summer at Meadowdale was drier than ours. I can relate to that. And this one from Lisa and Tim, the very last sentence, they're sharing how they still think of the yummy chocolate chip pancakes you gave us the morning we left Meadowdale. I mean, how cool is that? And this is evidently Lisa and Tim. That's taken at Meadowdale. And then a last one that I took a snapshot of was a lady named Amanda. I made it. It took me 103 days to paddle to Muir Glacier. And then she goes on to say that she met so many wonderful people along the way, so she didn't feel so alone. Thanks for getting me off to a great start. That was just so cool, leafing through all of those. And, you know, in spite of the noisy train there, Meadowdale did have its perks, just beautiful sunsets and sweeping views out toward the Strait of Juan de Fuca and southern tip of Whidbey Island. And Ranger Doug, he ran a tight ship. As soon as that sun went down, he was out there chasing all of those day users away. So again, I had the whole place to myself. Meadowdale to Camino Island, 20.5 nautical miles. This was my longest day because there were no other sites in between there. So I was kind of forced to do that. I have an UGG in there because this day was just a slog. I had no current assist, and I had a pretty steady headwind of about 10 to 12 knots the entire way. It never ever let up. And so that is looking across Possession Sound toward the south end of Whidbey. And I wasn't heading over to Whidbey. I was kind of splitting the difference and going up the center of the channel, heading toward Jedney Island, and then on to Camino, where my campsite was. So I think Jedney is also called Hat Island on some charts. But it's kind of like you can't get there from here. So Jedney is all privately owned. So I had about a 4-mile crossing to get there, and I couldn't land. And then from there, I had another 8 miles to my campsite. And I swear that tip, the southern tip of that island, Camino Head, it never, ever got any closer with that headwind. It was like I was on a nautical treadmill. It was just maddening. And I eventually did come alongside the island, and I still had a fair ways to go. So I just entertained myself by counting stairs. There were a fair number of these steep stairways all the way up these sandy bluffs. Quite a few of them, actually. But there's the Marine Trail campsite for Camino Island State Park. And I did not camp there. So this is where I got a little explaining to do. Now I'm at that little gap. So what happened here is, so when I'm arriving, again, I've done 20.5 nautical miles. It's a hot, hot day. And I'm really accustomed to paddling up in Alaska, where I'm wearing a full dry suit and it's cold and rainy. I'm more in my element that way, I think. So I was dehydrated, I was utterly exhausted, and I was in a really, really dour mood. And when I approached the state beach, it's a really nice, about, I don't know, a quarter mile long sandy beach. And this is no exaggeration. It was not wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder people, like hundreds and hundreds of day users. So, I mean, think boom boxes and barking dogs and screaming kids and jet skis and stand-up paddleboards and canoes and kayaks. It was an insane scene. And I could see the site there, but it was occupied by day users, and I was in no mood to ask them to leave. So I just put my blinders on, and I just put my head down, and I kept paddling past all this whole debacle, and then past the boat ramp, pulled my kayak up on a log, got my cell phone out of my day hatch, and I called my girlfriend, Laura Jo, who lived on the North End Camino, and I said, can I camp in your backyard? Can you come get me? And she did. And within an hour, I was camped in Laura Joe's quiet, shady, soft, grassy backyard. And there's her dog, Maji. Maji is Swahili for water, I believe. And she so wanted to climb into that tent with me. And I could not resist taking the kitty in the IKEA bag photo either. This is Laura Joe's little guy. And I ended up actually staying with Laura Joe for a second night. I realized that I'd been paddling and moving camp nonstop for 8 days. And that last day really kind of did me in. So I stayed there for an extra night and kind of rested and resupplied and got a hot shower, and Laura Joe cooked me nice meals. So it was really, really pleasant. And then she joined me for part of the next day. We launched from the north end of Camino, and there is, doing it again. I know how to fix this now. That's Laura Joe. She's another one of my trail angels, and she joined me for the short crossing over to Strawberry Point on Whidbey Island, and then she circled back and I kept going. So here I've left Laura Joe maybe less than an hour ago, and I'm approaching Goat Island. So on my right is the extensive Skagit River Delta, and then I've got Smilk Bay in front of me and Deception Pass off to the left, which I'd be going through in a couple of days. So again, just to orient you, down here on the bottom, I'm hoping you can see my cursor. There's Goat Island that I was approaching in that last image. And then Hope Island, that black X is Hope Island. And then Skagit Island, there were marine trail sites on both of those islands. And then of course, Deception Pass off to the west there. So I was gonna just kind of see what either of those look like and see where I ended up at, and just kind of go with the flow, which was my goal. And so I'm landed here on Hope, and there's a really nice family of 3. They were very welcoming. There were a few sites available still, but I was like, well, I think I'm just going to push on. It's really a short distance to Skagit. And so I'm on Skagit here looking back at Hope, and I was just so delighted when I got to Skagit Island and there was not a soul there. I had the whole little island all to myself. So I was just blissed out again. And I had myself a nice dinner. Laura had put together all these veggies for me so that I could have a salad, and with another can of wine that I had gotten back at the fish and chips place. So table for one with a most incredible view, Skagit Island. But rise and shine, the Deception Pass ebb current waits for no paddler. Any of you that have paddled in Deception Pass know that you definitely want your timing to be spot on, especially in a fully loaded expedition boat. So it was really hard to pack up and depart from that primo campsite. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. So here I'm approaching Deception Pass. I'm going through at the tail end of the ebb current. So I had a nice little pull through there going through the skinny side, Canoe Pass. And the bridge looks kind of odd there because they were doing some construction at the time. And I think that's just a covering so that the rocks and whatnot from the construction don't fall onto boaters going underneath there. But working my way through the kelp beds and coming into Bowman Bay. Low tide at Bowman Bay. That was a bit of a muck fest, but I was rewarded by this beautiful campsite. Once again, tucked back in the woods there. And Bowman Bay is it's a really special area to me. Not only is it just a beautiful area, really fun to explore. There's tons and tons of trails. It's where I met my partner paddling in Deception Pass, and it's It's the launch point for your play days in Deception Pass. And it's also where two of my dear friends' ashes have been scattered at, at their request. So it's just real special place in my heart. And this is the view from the Marine Trail campsite that evening. Not too shabby. Next day, loading up and heading out to Cypress Island, Cypress Head on Cypress Island. And again, to orient you here, that's Lopez Island in the distance, Rosario Strait leading up to it. So I'm working my way along Fidalgo Island's shoreline. This is Green Point, and come around the corner, and I landed briefly at Washington Park, and across the way there, that's Cypress Island, where I'm heading next. But this picture is, it's just kind of a nondescript photo, kind of a mundane image. But to me, it was a very pivotal moment, because where my kayak is right there, I think, is exactly where my kayak was on May 5th, 2010, when I launched to paddle 1,200 miles solo to Alaska. So this is where I have finally connected. And of course, it's not going to cooperate again. I finally connected that last dot at Sunset Beach. So I got her done. And I ran into this couple just before I launched in their small sailboat who had just come from Pelican Beach. That's originally where I was going to camp on Cypress Island. And they warned me. They had just come from there, and they're like, don't go there. It's, again, a mob scene. Just wall-to-wall people, just overrun, dogs, music, partiers. And so I was like, okay, thanks for the tip. I am going to make a beeline for Cypress Head, which is just south of Pelican Beach. And Pelican Beach is so popular because it's just a real gentle sloping beach. It's super easy for motorboaters to anchor out there and come in on their dinghies. But that's not the case with Cypress Head. This was my campsite there. You really have to work. It's quite a hoof up with all of your gear up on the bluff up there. But man, the solitude and the view is just worth it. And when I got there, there was just one other camper there, and he wasn't, he or she, I didn't know at the time, wasn't around when I arrived. But then a few hours later, he shows up from a long hike. And I realized, oh my gosh, this is an old friend of mine. His name is Rem Smith, and we both are members of the Hole in the Wall Paddling Club out of Anacortes. And he had since moved to Arizona, and he just happened to be back in the San Juans paddling for about a week. And it was so fun to catch up with Rem and just sit around the campfire and shoot the breeze. And my partner knew that I was really close to Lummi Island now. So he called and he said, hey, why don't I come over and I'll bring some cold beer and some firewood. So Ben motored over in the big boat, and he entertained us for a couple of hours, which was really special. And Rem took this photo of us together because we hadn't seen each other for about 12 days now. And then went back home, and then I stayed, actually ended up staying a couple more nights at Cypress Head because a pretty good windstorm came through. So I just hunkered down with Rem and was just happy as a clam. And then the weather kind of settled down a little bit, and I thought, I think I'm gonna make a run for it. So that's Lummi Island, and that red arrow is pointing just about to my roof in Lego Bay. So I made the crossing, and I took a quick pit stop on what's called Lummi Rocks. It's just a small cluster of rocks toward the south end of the island. So now I've got maybe 3.5 miles left to go on this journey. And I tell you, it ain't over till it's over, right? Because here I can almost see the roof of my house, and oh my gosh, the skies just opened up and the rain poured down, and it was raining so hard. It was just like drumming like crazy off of the deck of my boat and my spray skirt, and it was just pouring in rivulets off of my my rain hat, and it was just like, it was hysterical. And so I started laughing so loud. It was just like, I was just in my happy place. It didn't matter, because like, sure, I'm in a dry suit and I'm going to be in a hot shower in about an hour, but it's just like, as I'm sure many of you can relate, when you're at the tail end of a multi-day paddling trip, it doesn't matter if it's 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months. It's such a feeling of empowerment and accomplishment. And I think those feelings, that's why I keep coming back more and more to re-experience that type of feeling. That's just, you know, my passion. And I'm so glad, I'm so thankful that I took this opportunity to explore my local waters more. And I think that in doing so, I really did come away with a better understanding and a better appreciation of these waters that make up the Sailor Sea. And I think I also came away with a desire to really want to know more and want to protect more. And with that, I will end it and open it up to questions and answers.